All right, My Muscle Project. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we are joined by, you've only second time in the
Second
show,
time,
second time, but you've actually been in the studio before. Actually, first time in the new studio, but down the hall, you used to record the Fair Points podcast.
Yep.
To be concluded, returned in future at a future
Yeah,
date.
we're definitely going to do a season 2 if Smith ever gets back into Australia.
Yeah, but that soothing, sexy voice is Sonny Webster. But today we're doing a business podcast. So obviously we talked about last time your weightlifting journey and all that sort of stuff. But today I want to talk about the entrepreneurial side of Sonny, which obviously is for me and for Raf obviously the most interesting side. But I actually was thinking about what I would ask you to start today, and because you and I have spoken a lot since, had a friendship, so we've covered a lot of ground. But one thing I actually haven't asked you yet is how many podcasts do you still go on and talk about weightlifting like you did, say, 5-6 years ago?
Yeah, it's definitely changed now, what people want to talk about. And I think for me personally, I've told my story and my journey as a weightlifter so many times on many different podcasts. And I feel like my weightlifting was very much chapter 1 for me in terms of my life and everything that I had as a goal to be as an athlete. And now I'm kind of into chapter 2, and it's definitely for me now much more of a focus on business and kind of leaving my legacy and changing the game in weightlifting from a different sort of viewpoint.
Yeah, I remember, I don't know if you want to get into the details publicly yet, but you even mentioned how you don't even see yourself as Sonny the weightlifting coach anymore. You want to be Sonny the apparel, industry icon, tycoon. That transition there, that transition of identity, when do you think that really kicked off, when you started going? Was it the day you launched your apparel company, which we'll get into the history of that and everything else, but that changing identity is big. That's like when we go from CrossFitters to business owners, out of the athlete to the business owner. When do you think that happened?
Yeah, well, I think for any elite level athlete, an Olympian especially, you dedicate so much of your life to that one thing. You very much identify as that person. And it's hard, I think, for a lot of athletes to separate away from when they finish their career as to who am I now, and what am I going to be now? Because for their whole life, they've been identified as the athlete. And it takes people a long time to sort of have that transition, and really find themselves again and, switch their purpose, if anything, once they've left the sort of competitive field. And I think for me, it wasn't until I transitioned, first of all, from an athlete to a coach. And then after I'm still very much a coach, and it's a massive part of my business now in the coaching sort of industry. But it was at that point when I sort of swapped over that I managed to kind of realize that I could wear other hats than just the hat of being an athlete. And I'd say I was quite fortunate in the fact that happened just a couple of years after finishing the Olympic Games, so sort of 2018 sort of time. And directly with the clothing, that's something that has always been a passion of mine, fashion, clothing, etc. And it was just looking for the right time to kind of introduce that into my space, which is extremely difficult, as weightlifting has never been known as a fashion sport.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting is for most people that do what you've done, where you go from athlete or say really fit person that I guess is quote unquote athlete to online personality to selling what you've done as an athlete in digital form, programs, training, coaching, all that sort of stuff. And now you made the pivot to apparel. It's almost like a completely different, kettle of fish. Yeah, of course there are things that relate in between, but mostly it's a completely new industry. It's not like you then were a weightlifter and you're like, now I'm going to release like my lifting straps and my weightlifting belt, which kind of makes sense, right? So the game, but you went, obviously that's still part of it, but that's a fraction of what it really is, your apparel company. But what do you think it is that stops most people, because you've surrounded yourself with these people as well, so have Raf and I, that don't make that pivot? Because you could easily not. You could just stick with Sonny, the lifting zone, the academy, just coaching people online. Obviously, fashion can still be a passion of yours without actually making it a business. Why do you think most people stop, at, say, their version of the lifting zone and they don't go on to other things?
Yeah, well, I think, even prior to that, a lot of people struggle from the transition of being a great athlete and then putting on a business hat and being able to actually monetize their following and their platform online. A lot of people struggle with that because being a great athlete and being a great business person are two extremely different things. I was very lucky throughout my life to be surrounded by successful business people. And I think that definitely paved the way for me to learn and understand what it takes to run a business, what it takes to sell product. And I've been in this game, 7 years selling products online. So it's very, very much an old thing for me to sell a PDF. I was one of the first people that was doing that. But even when I first started out selling products, I laugh now looking back at it, but my sales process back then was I had a PDF. I had this email sequence where I'd ask people to direct message me on Instagram if they wanted a training program. Once they said yes, I'd send them out the first email that would be, this is what the program is. And then after they said, yep, I want it, then I'd send them out the next email that would say, okay, this is how you pay. And then once the payment had hit the bank, I'd ask them to then send me a screenshot of their payment confirmation, line those two things up, and then send them out the program. And I thought I was killing it. I remember I made my first £10,000. I was like, this is the life. This is me set forever. I've got this on lockdown. I was sending 200 emails a day. Just literally click, 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 me doing it by myself. And it wasn't until I met Cameron, who's now head of my marketing team for the programming. And he said, hey, I've seen what you're doing online and you're selling programs. I think I can, help you with that. And because I had no sales funnel or anything, within 24 hours, he sends me over a sales page. And I was like, what's this?
How long ago was this?
This is about 7 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So after you were weightlifting?
Yeah, it was towards the end of my sort of competitive career. And I was like, this is unreal, this sales page with all this information on. And then I was like, so Cam, what you're telling me now is I don't have to send the emails and someone can pay on that and it automatically sends it to them. And my head was blown. I was like, what the hell is this? This is incredible. It's just completely streamlined my journey. But I think what I'm getting at there is, actually having someone who is an expert in that field to help me then made a huge jump really in my progress in online sales.
I sometimes pinch myself with how obviously luck, we've talked about this, you believe luck is not a factor, you create your own luck. I still believe luck is definitely a factor in some things, but do you think you count yourself lucky in some sense that you and Cam's worlds collided and that he was because he was your first employee, right? Yeah, so of all the people that could have been number one, I mean, loads of people's first employee are duds, right? You scored someone, he's still with you, right, today?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
the odds of that.
It's a huge part of what we do now.
Yeah.
I do agree that, luck comes into it a little bit, but I think everyone has opportunities that pass them by every single day, and it's just whether you're prepared to reach out and give them a go. And that's not to say that Cam wasn't the first person that gave me a proposition that he could help me sell more online. It comes into my inbox every single day in my emails
right.
we can make you 20,000 online, and you go away.
Yeah.
But this is exactly one of those opportunities that at the very early days, I thought, what's the worst that can happen if I give this guy a chance to show me what he can do? It's going to fail. And I can deal with that. I'm no worse off in that respect. So I think for me, it was about being prepared and open to take that opportunity to grow. And I think one of the biggest things that limits people in the fitness industry and making money in the fitness industry is being putting their own ego to one side and being open to have someone else with more expertise than you come in and help you grow. Because I think especially as an athlete or as someone who's extremely fit, as you refer to it as, seeking help in that sort of game, it's you kind of perceive it a little bit as a weakness in your own character that you can't do it by yourself. And I think that's even more prominent in individual sport because you don't rely on anyone else. It's you and the bar, it's you and the football, or it's you and whatever it is in that individual sport. So I think it's being open to to listening to someone else.
Yeah.
And when you started making money from the programs, was that the first time you'd made some decent money, or had you got paid well at some points in weightlifting and you were like, this is cool because it's the first time outside of weightlifting, or it's like, this is cool because it's the first time I've
paid
made
well
money?
in weightlifting, and he just instantly starts laughing.
Yeah, that sentence doesn't really go hand in hand. I think, as a weightlifter, it's never renowned that you're going to make any heap of money at all. I think, even at competition, at world level, at European level, we used to get £50, which is about $100 if you broke the national record.
That's it.
Yeah, I think, you go to a world championships, you get a pat on the back. I think at my highest point throughout my career, funded by UK Sport, I may have got about £1,000 a month. So $2,000 a month to live off, to fund my training and everything. And my first sort of sponsorship aside from Jeff, so a paid company, I used to get, I think, £500 a month for a protein company that was sponsored. And I thought that was brilliant. But no, there wasn't really any substantial amount of money that was made during weightlifting. I think at my peak, the amount of money that I'd made during my career, if I was to put a number on it, would have been around £25,000
in total.
In total, from start to finish. I think I made about 25 grand, and that's including like sponsorship, etc. In terms of what I put aside outside of what was my living costs, what Jeff was funding my training for, was that.
Wow.
So,
and do you think that left you hungrier to do business after?
I think at the point when I was an athlete, it wasn't something that was an important factor. It wasn't something that was at the top of my food chain in terms of I want to make $1 million, or it was very much for me, I want to go to the Olympics. And I never was under any illusion that the Olympics was going to bring me money. I know there's very few sports that when you reach that top point, especially Olympic sports, that you're going to get a big payday. It just doesn't happen. And I always say to people, if you're in weightlifting for money, then you're in it for the wrong reasons.
You're going to leave disappointed.
Yeah. You're not going to make much. Yeah. It's interesting because you imagine there are so many sports out there that people start as a means to financial prosperity and freedom, right? They say, basketball got me out of the hood, or, football took me out of the favelas, or whatever it is, right? There's so many of those stories. It's like, hey, I'm choosing this to get me out of poverty. Weightlifting is just not that choice.
No, and I even remember, because golf was obviously my passion and still is a passion of mine now. When I was younger, I used to remember saying to my mum, I'm going to be a professional golfer and buy you a Ferrari one day. It's exactly that, because you see the lifestyles as a kid growing up that elite sports people have, and you do have that association between I want to be great at that sport because I want not only to be good at that sport and the success, but you want the financial incentive as well. That's a huge part, I think, for a lot of people when they decide what sport do I want to do when I'm younger. It's what also comes with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if you don't think it's money, it's the things that money buy, right? It's like the cars or like the attention or the clothes or whatever. It's not necessarily, I want $100 million contract. Yeah. It's like, I want to drive a Porsche 911, because Michael Jordan does or whatever. So how did you, actually, no, I'll ask you this, but how did you know that golf was not going to be the sport? Because you played golf at a very high level when you were young and you did weightlifting. When did you decide to go not make money and lift a barbell?
Yeah.
Versus swing a club.
Well, one conversation really sticks out to me when I reflect back at my time growing up and kind of that decision in particular. And I remember being sat with my auntie in America at a house, and she said, do you want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none? Or do you want to actually be successful in one thing? And that really hit home to me, because that's exactly how it felt for me as an athlete at the time, because I was playing off a handicap of 2. I was at Golf Academy, and I wanted to go to the Olympic Games. And I just missed out on trying to go to London 2012. And that was very much when I was giving golf a lot of attention and weightlifting at the same time. And my day would be like going to Golf Academy, hitting balls all day. As soon as I finished practice after college, then I'd get on the bus and go down and do my weightlifting. So I was very much juggling both balls. And I think after missing out on London, it made me realize if I was going to do what it took to not miss out and make Rio 2016, something huge in my life had to change. And it was the fact that I had to make that decision that it was either going to be golf or weightlifting. And I think in my hearts of hearts, when I reflect, like, I was good at golf, but when I compared myself to the other people that I was playing with, my peers at that time, they were very much leagues ahead of me. Right. And I think it was just being honest with myself at that point. You know, I wasn't going to kid myself. I knew my chances of reaching success in weightlifting were far greater than they were at golf, you know.
Right.
Fortunately, far less people do weightlifting than golf.
That probably helps. It probably doesn't help as well that you're like, is there a body type for golf? I mean, I would imagine that your body type is, there's no golfers that look like you to begin with. But is there a body type for golf anyway? Like, are you, like, if you hadn't done weightlifting, would you have been that body type?
Yeah, well, I think during the sort of early 2000s, people sort of like training and strength training and power training was never really a thing in golf. You know, you look back at the old school golfers, the John Daly's, etc., smoking fags and drinking beers and fat guts and doing really well. It wasn't until sort of Tiger came around and through his sort of early 20s to 30s, and he started, I guess, pioneering strength training to assist his golf, that people started to think, you know, hang on, we don't have to be tall and slender and to hit golf balls. You know, if you were going to play well on the tour, you needed to be strong. You needed to hit the ball further. And I think people's perception of what a golfer looked like changed, you know. You've got great golfers now like DeChambeau, you know, these guys are athletes, you know, they take their shirts off, they're ripped, they're strong, they're training just as much in the gym as they are on the golf course. So I think people's perception had changed, and that definitely wasn't something for me when I made my decision about golf or weightlifting had an impact on my decision on my body shape. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's I mean, golf is one of those sports. I feel like in the strength and conditioning world for a long time, it was like left behind.
It's the forgotten.
Yeah, but I mean, it accelerates very quickly now, right? With the knowledge and stuff in strength and conditioning, and injuries and how much they play.
And they have the money for it, so they get the best straight away.
Of course. Yeah, of course. They can make it happen overnight.
Yeah. But I think like anything, like your environment plays a huge part in that as well. I was at that point in my life in Bristol, I had one of the best weightlifting coaches in the world at my doorstep and was lucky enough to be working with him. Had I been in a scenario where I was training under Tiger Woods or under Butch Harmon, I think was the top golf coach at the time, at his facility in America, and I had everything that I could possibly need in order to take that step to be a professional golfer, my decision would have been different, I think, you know, because that plays a huge part. And I think that's something that not a lot of athletes talk about. But, you know, we spent so much time in university studying about how your demographic impacts your chances of winning an Olympic medal. And there's this small little place in down in the south of England where I think every sailing medalists for the Olympics for Great Britain have come from this small town of like 4,000 people, because that's where the sailing hub is. So it does have a huge impact. You know, if you live close to a velodrome, your likelihood of being an Olympic medalist in cycling goes up in England, you know?
Well, that actually is a good segue into a question I had about business and I feel like every entrepreneur thinks about this question and asks it like throughout their whole journey, is that how much of entrepreneurship is learned versus how much it is inherent, you know, within. And inherent, like, you know, I don't want to call it like genetic, but that would be you have no entrepreneurs in your family, you have no entrepreneurs in your friendship group, you only see what you see from, you know, social media or TV, and yet you become a business owner. You know, obviously you could argue then to some respect that it's not a learned skill. You didn't pick it up from your environment, right? Is it something you've thought about a lot in terms of where did my drive to be an entrepreneur come from, and was it learned or was it always inherent within me?
Yeah, I think, you know, we go back to obviously we're very much byproducts of our parents, and they have a huge influence on us in early life. My dad ran his own business from as young as I could remember, and, you know, that was definitely something that impacted me to be able to, or inspired me to want to have my own business, because my dad had that.
What did he do?
And he's in home improvements. He's selling garage doors and pretty successful business in the UK. And my first business that I ever had was selling sweets in school. So I used to go to Costco, buy bumper packs of sweets, and then at lunchtime sell them off. Or I used to get £2 for my lunch money each day, and I would go to the sweet shop on the way to school, buy sweets for 10p, and then at school sell them, and I'd normally get £5. So I'd be making £3 profit each day and still getting my lunch.
And then eating the profit.
Yeah. But this is the thing. Yeah, I managed to get 2 paninis instead of one. But this is the thing, like, and then that kind of progressed into my first business, I guess, where I made some decent money, was buying and selling golf clubs. And I was 12 years old, and at the top where I used to live in my parents' house, I used to have golf clubs online, have golf clubs that I had, and I wanted to obviously trade them up and get better golf clubs. And my dad wasn't just about to go out and buy me everything that I wanted, so I used to put them on eBay and then sell them for more. Nice. And then I'd go onto eBay, and because I knew so much about golf clubs, I'd see particular golf clubs that were just marketed and advertised terribly. Like, the photos were crap. There was like not enough information on there. So I used to pick them up at a steal price and then get them back to my house, use my dad's little camera, take nice photos of them in good light, and put them back up for more without even touching them, and make more money. And so, like, from 12 years old, I was starting to understand, marketing and sales, So again, when you ask whether it's inherent, it's definitely something that throughout my early ages of my life, I was developing,
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how hearing you talk about taking the photos and stuff, it's so similar to what you do now with the good lighting and marketing and putting up there. It's very early days e-commerce, and now you're still in e-commerce. Do you find I've always found it interesting because Raph and I live in both worlds. We live in-person sales and we live in e-commerce sales. We get both skill sets. But do you find that selling primarily online, you still feel confident? Like, did you have a sales job where you had to sell in person? You never did. Do you find it a natural skill that comes to you, selling your products or selling your business or selling your vision to your employees or future prospects or anything like that? Or do you find it's not a natural skill as it is, say, selling online?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of comes back to the whole, when you have someone who's a PT and they've done their hours in the gym PTing and doing one-on-one sessions and taking money and then wanting to go online, the process in which you go through as a face-to-face PT or someone who's face-to-face selling a product, your time, your services, you get skilled and good at trying to get that person to come back in for their next session, And it's kind of that same principle that you then take online. So I do think there is some synergy there, definitely, in terms of the skills that you learn face-to-face as a coach or as a salesman to be able to take them online. But there's a lot of great marketers out there that you'd meet and they'd be completely socially awkward, wouldn't be able to hold a conversation, wouldn't be able to sell you anything, but yet will have an e-commerce site that's doing millions a month, So I think both of them play a part, but it depends where your skills lie. If you're someone that works really well on face-to-face sales and you could sell me this cup for $100, the way in which you would sell online or do really well would potentially have a webinar funnel, because you get that opportunity to speak and present to people, versus potentially sticking all your ad spend budget into a really slick, polished ad, which has no sort of reflection of you as a person or as you as a salesman. So I think you've definitely got to play to your strengths. And I think that that's something that over the years of selling online, you work out what you're good at and what you're not good at. And this is where, I guess, for me as an expert in my field, I value where my strengths lie in terms of my selling, and we kind of focus on them when we're trying to sell product,
So what have you, because I think it's always a fascinating journey coming to realize what you're good at and what you're not good at, and which is also interesting because sometimes what you want to be good at, you're just not good at. And you're like, but I want to be like the design guy, or I want to be like the sales guy. It's like, bro, it's not you.
It's like every sports team, right? You're like, I'll be the attacker. Someone's got to defend.
You're on the bench, bro. assistant water bottle guy.
It's so true, though, isn't
it? So what did you have to discover you thought were your strengths maybe and end up being your weaknesses, and what maybe did you think you weren't good at and turns out you are really good at?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in any business that you've got to have a understanding and have tried every element of your business, regardless of whether it's something that you continue to stick through and do. I'm a big believer of that because even now when I speak to people within my team, I have a basic understanding of their role and their job so that when I'm trying to provide them with my knowledge and my skill set from a creative standpoint, I can then transpire that into their role. So I believe that you have to have knowledge in every single area. In terms of what I'm good at, I would say in terms of the creative side of things is definitely where my strengths lie. And that when we talk about creative, I think people naturally think, oh, drawing pictures or, coming up with designs,
Paintings.
Paintings or
ceramic mugs.
or graphics,
Yeah.
But for me, like the creative flair that I have is solving problems to a degree and coming up with, I guess, creative ideas that are going to potentially make us money or push for sales. So it definitely encapsulates a lot of different areas when you talk about someone who's a good creative. One of the things that I definitely am not good at is the business running side of things, the financial forecasting, numbers aren't an area of my strength. Yeah, well, this is very similar to you two. And with that being said, I was very lucky with Jeff, who I've spoken to you about many a times, who's been a huge figure in my life. From an early age, I had Jeff playing that role in my life and helping me with those elements of finance and numbers, even before I asked him to be my CEO. And he really took that on board. So I was very fortunate to have that from a young age. But I didn't really acknowledge it too much until I had a conversation with the CEO of Tropika. Tropika is an online e-commerce business out here in Australia. They sell protein powders, health food powders, etc. And Linda was actually working for them during the last lockdown, doing some content creation, etc. And I like to spend like an hour of every week of mine to reach out to someone with more expertise than me or in an area that I don't know too much about to learn, to find out more about that. And Lyndall suggested one week that I'd jump on a call with the CEO of Tropika. And it was one of the most enlightening conversations for me as a business person to sit and speak to him. I told him all about my journey. And he sat and listened it really well. And at the end of it, he said, Sonny, if I can give you one bit of advice, he said that you're not a CEO, you're not a business owner, you're a creative. And if there's one thing that you can do that's going to help you improve your business, it'd be hire a CEO. And I'd never even thought, and I don't think people naturally think when you run a business, that you hire someone to be the head of the business that you own, because it's not something that you'd ever really think about. But for me, I got off that phone call and it was like a light bulb just turned on, and I rang Jeff up. And even though he was already naturally kind of playing that role, I asked him to be the CEO of all of my businesses, and that completely changed everything for me because it enabled me to then solely focus on what I was good at and what I enjoyed doing. And I'm lucky that those two things align in terms of what I'm good at and what I enjoy,
Yeah.
Had he been a CEO in the past? Had he run his own businesses in the past?
He definitely had his multiple of his own businesses, mainly in the telecoms industry. That guy and the way he remembers numbers is ridiculous. He knows my bank card numbers of probably every single bank card in my wallet, like security codes, everything. He's just a numbers man.
Yeah.
And he had run multi-million-dollar businesses in the telecoms industry himself. So he actually doesn't work as much as he used to in those industries. So it's kind of like good timing for him as well to sink his skills and his knowledge into a completely different field. So it kind of tied in quite nicely for us both. And
how did you attract him to be your CEO?
Yeah, so I speak to him every single day. We're extremely close. He's like an older brother to me, more than anything. So I think, he's always looked out for me and always wanted to help me. But I offered him a huge percentage of all of my businesses in order to come work with me. Yeah. And I think, one of the things when you look at that, you'd be like, whoa, you're giving him a lot. But for so many years, he'd never had anything from me and never asked for anything from me. So for me, that percentage kind of reflected more about what he'd helped me build. Yeah, what he'd helped me build, you know.
Yeah.
And not only that, I think with anything like this, it's always got to be enough for someone to want to get their teeth sunk into it. I'm not under any illusion that Jeff believes that, you know, because his businesses are extremely successful, they make him a lot of money, that he's in it because he can see a big payday 10 years down the line. But I think for him than anything, it's that want for new challenge. And it kind of explains why, you know, I've moved into the clothing from selling online training programs, because for me, that's the whole new challenge.
Yeah. I look at older guys in our life that are like investors, and I think the same thing. And guys who, you know, invest in us, but also just invest in other companies that are older. They don't need to invest or do anything. And I go, what is it that drives them? Because if you can understand that, obviously you can play to it and you can get more out of them. And it's exactly that. It's the challenge that they've conquered these fields, and they're like, let me see if I can step out of, you know, basketball, and let's see if I can be a good golfer, you know, like a Michael Jordan, best at basketball in the world. Then he wants to take on golf, right? Yeah. It's like they naturally are driven and hungry, and they want to see if they can challenge. I want to see if I can grow. How old is Jeff?
50.
Yeah, so can a 50-year-old grow a multi-million-dollar apparel company that is, you know, fashion is so trends-based right now. The trends change so quickly. For him, that's probably like a huge achievement and a huge challenge for him, right? And it's just like thrives off challenges.
Yeah.
I could imagine in the future, if opportunities presented themselves to me as an investor, and they were like something I didn't know anything about, I'd be like, this is an exciting, fun challenge to do something that I don't know. And like, we can still get that out of what we do anyway now, but I can see how for those guys, if, you know, your whole life you did construction and now you want to do this field, it's an exciting challenge.
Well, the core principles remain the same. Doesn't matter whether you're selling a pen or a piece of clothing, you know. The principles of selling, the principles of running a successful business remain the same, which is why a lot of the skills are transferable depending on what industry you're in. Yeah. And with that being said, for me, because the mobility manual, my online programming is still very much the lead of where I make my money. There's been so many other lessons in e-commerce and in clothing that I've had to learn and am still learning that was a far bigger step than I kind of appreciated, to the point where I'm kind of in that space now where I'm like, do I need to take a step back and go back to university and study more on this? Because I'm kind of hitting walls now where there's things that I either need to employ someone to do for me, or I need to go and learn myself because I don't know enough about it.
Well, what sort of stuff?
From a design point of view, for a production point of view, clothing production, I've been back and forth. We're currently working on developing the first ever lifting specific weightlifting legging. It's one of the things that for a lot of weightlifters they struggle with. Like tights, yeah.
Fucking stretchy though.
Yeah, but stretchy as fuck. But also, like, the ripping is a
like
huge
the
part
barbell
of them,
hitting the leg,
etc. You know, and no one really had made a legging for weightlifting that was fashion focused as well. There's a lot of companies out there that have produced performance-based leggings. Skins being one of the first people to sort of pioneer that performance legging, but that was never created with lifting in mind. You know, so I've been back and forth with the printers and the factory that are making these leggings, and the first meeting I went, they were like, right, so you need to go and see a pattern maker and get the pattern maker to create a pattern. What the fuck is a pattern? I was like, chat, do you know what a pattern is? And, you know, then we got the pattern, and then we went back to the lady, and it just looked like a completely different language, this document. She's like, no, that's not finished. You need to put the design now on the pattern. I'm like, fuck. And then we go to the factory that make the fabric, and he's like, right, so do you know how much fabric that you need in order to make your samples? And I'm like, no. And then he's like, well, the pattern maker will need to tell you that so they can come. And I'm just like, all of these things, I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
Because you go in there and they just presume you would know because you're in fashion or creating clothes.
Yeah,
but I don't know these things, you know.
Yeah.
So it's extremely there's so many days where I just want to pull my hair out, but that's part of this new challenge for me to learn.
Yeah, it's so interesting because the apparel game is so easy to get into, yet when it actually comes to running a successful apparel company, the percentages all play out the same, right? It's like everyone's got a clothing brand, but how many people's clothing brand actually makes money sustainably long term? It's very few, right? Just like any gym business, right? Loads of people open gyms. How many people open multi-million-dollar facilities that are extremely profitable and have multiple locations? The same percentage, very, very few.
And this is where there's a huge difference, I think, for people that are creating something that's merch and creating something that is a brand, something that people want to associate with, because as someone who's got a social media following, big or small, there's a certain amount of people that will buy whatever you want to sell because they want to support you and they like you. Now, after that initial bit has subsided,
the first PDF,
you need to actually be able to create something that people like. That's a good quality product that they want to continue to buy. But then not only that, create something that people who don't know you want to buy.
That's a huge jump.
And that's really where having a really good brand ethos and I guess a brand vision is so important, so that's something that someone who doesn't know you can buy into.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about this before, and I know something that you've done as sort of a side hustle is help other people do what you've done, convert what you know as a trainer or an athlete into something online. And then you said it's after that first initial sale, it's the sustainability after that, which is really tough. And I see it all the time. So many people start their online thing and then they fizzle out and they're back to in-person PT because it's that sustainability. What are some of the more nuances of that sustainability that you just covered to keep growing, not just even just make more sales, but like grow and do what you've done and have an app and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So this is the point where when we look back at, like I said, about that journey from me selling PDFs via email to that point where I met Cam and hired an expert that understands marketing, that's the point that people get to. And then they go, I've only ever worked by myself. I don't know what it's like to work with someone else, to employ someone else, or to use someone's expert. And they stop and they fizzle out and they go back here. For me, it's at that point when you kind of ride out that initial hype, you need to then employ people that have different expertise and skills to help you diversify yourself in terms of your sales funnels to be able to continue to grow, to continue to reach new audiences. And marketing is such a huge element of that, and it's like you were saying the other day about outward sales and inward sales. It's really pushing towards that outward sale funnel to be able to bring in new people to see your brand. And that's what was really important for me in terms of being able to continue to grow and to reach people online, mainly with the programming and the mobility manual, more so than the clothes. I haven't really nailed it yet with the clothes. We haven't really gone into the point where we're really running successful ads with the clothes yet, because we're still very much in that early stages where we're finding their feet. And there's been a lot over the last, it's only a year or so old now. There's been a lot in the last year where it's been very much me learning what works, learning what people like, until we're at a point now where we've got some solid products that I'd be prepared to stick a budget behind to reach an audience that don't know me.
Yeah, what's interesting about apparel for people that don't know, and this is only a little bit that I've gathered from, obviously our relationship with Recgen and Zanerobe and with you and some other people, is that most clothing companies hit big and sustain the company off a couple of products. In some case, one single product that they do exceptionally well, and they build the brand around it. And it sounds like for you, it's like it's finding that product. For an Australian company that some people know, Earls, they created this basketball short, right? And that's what they sell out of. That sustains everything. That puts revenue for the jackets and for the t-shirts and for the ads and everything. But it all came because they hit with these shorts, right? And there's different companies and examples out there as well. But it sounds like you're still finding what that is and getting closer.
Yeah,
right?
getting much closer. And, I'm very fortunate that we don't solely, because it's very different running a business that's solely reliant on that financial source or income in order to be able to stay sustainable. I've got my other businesses that I've been able to use, especially initially, to fund the development of the business and finding new products. So if something doesn't work for us, it's okay, lesson learned, we can try something else. You know, we get out scot-free, great. But a lot of businesses don't have that ability from a financial standpoint to begin with to be able to make mistakes and still continue to keep moving. You know, you can invest 10,000 into development of product and then you're sat with 10,000 in stock in your warehouse and it doesn't sell, you're up shit creek, you know? And that's been something that's really been hard for me to get my head around as well, is we can be sat with 50 grand or 100 grand's worth of stuff that's sat in a warehouse at a period of time in between sales. We were like, that's a lot of fucking money that's sat there, you know? So
that's what Black Friday was invented. Clear that shit.
Clear that shit.
Pretty much.
100%.
100% off.
Yeah. So we're fortunate in that respect that we've been able to, during this year, try lots of different things and see what sticks, see what doesn't. And, you know, I'm in no rush with this because, like I said, from a personal standpoint, for me, when it comes to the clothing, it's a passion of mine and I'm really enjoying the learning process. And it's just like when you go through an online education course or you go to school, I'm kind of in semester 1 at the moment, just kind of learning the first few bits. And, you know, I'm quite happy being there because it's all part of the fun. And you never want to lose sight of the fact that the most enjoyable part is this journey that I'm on now, and these kind of mistakes and lessons that I'm learning daily. I'm just very fortunate that they don't necessarily hurt me too much financially when something doesn't go wrong, doesn't go right, rather.
Yeah, you never want to place a bet where you're at that if the bet goes wrong, it ends everything. Yeah, and you would never, but some people do. Some people get to that point and they take big risks like that, you know.
That's why you have a CEO to be able to help manage those risks. And it is even more so important in a business that, you know, when you have someone like myself, I'm very passionate about what I do, and I can sometimes let my emotions lead a lot of my decisions in business. And I find it, in my early years, found it very difficult to be able to switch my emotional brain off and let the numbers do the talking, because it's not a strength of mine. And to have someone that I have in my business like Jeff that can allow me to see the black and white lines of, you know, the non-emotional side of what decisions and the outcomes of decisions will make, it makes it easier, you know. And that's so important to be able to do that, because I think where a lot of businesses go wrong, regardless of your industry, is they let that passion try and lead them. And if you're not careful, that's can what get you into sticky situations.
Yeah, I would say for people people that run a business or are part of a business, probably the most easily relatable example of that is when you really like someone, say like a prospect employee or a new employee, and you're like, or even a business partner, a potential business partner, you're like, I really like this person. We get along so well. It's awesome. We do this, we do that. But, you know, if you hire this salesperson that you absolutely love and adore, but they don't make any sales, it's like, well, you're going to have to need to get rid of this person, right? And so that's what you're talking about. It's like there is an emotional side of you because you're human that likes other humans and you want to be around this person, but you also have a business to run. And if they can't hit their numbers and do their job, you know, as much as it sucks, you know, you need to be not emotional about it. Because if you're too emotional, like, no, I like them, we'll hang on to them, we'll fix them, we'll get them better, we'll keep training them, you're just going to keep losing money. And you're going to potentially not find that other person who maybe you don't like quite as much, but you still like them enough, but they smash it for you, right? So that's I think where the rational brain and the emotional brain really kind of conflict a lot is with the people in your business.
Yeah. And this is where, like, across the two businesses that I do in terms of e-commerce and training programs, you don't have that issue of me creating something kind of in clothing that, well, I like it, I would wear it, it's cool. Yeah. Because there's that matter of opinion, you know. What I want to wear, you'd be like, well, I don't really like that. You know, when it comes to training and selling someone something that's results-based, there isn't a matter of opinion in it. Yeah. It's you go through this course, you will progress. And people buy into that progress and they don't have an opinion on it. And that's where it's a completely different ball game when you're playing with someone's opinion. And it also makes it even more important then that you try and take out your emotional side and your own personal feelings towards something, so that you're not creating something that you like, because everyone else might not necessarily like it. You've got to create something that your audience want. And that's where you've always got to be open-eared when you're creating things, to go, you know, ask your audience, what do they want? And I've seen it happen so many times. Even with successful business people, they create a product or they create an online course and they go, this is the best thing that I've ever created. I'm so proud of it. And then no one wants to buy it. And I turn around to them and I go, did you ask people whether they wanted that? And they go, oh, you know? And
Or they just felt like they needed it.
Well, they never fucking asked. You know, it was what they thought the people needed, not what the people asked from them. And that's why you've got to always be open and listening to what your audience is saying to you, because else you'll end up creating stuff and spending a lot of money and time and investing into something that, you're proud of, but people never asked for.
Yeah.
You know, and I kind of think it's that line between, especially as an educator, you can go way above and beyond giving someone something that's of super high standard or high level in terms of education. When, you know, for someone like me, people want to come to a seminar, not for me to blow their brain on bar path kinematics. They want me to scream, send it at them and help them hit a PB. I know that. And I play to my audience when I go to do a seminar because I know that's what they're here for.
Yeah.
You know, people asked me for help with mobility. I created the mobility manual. The product that I'm most proud of is probably my Learn to Lift course, because I think the knowledge and education in that in terms of a process for people to learn weightlifting is great. But yet, mobility is what sells, because that's what people ask for.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's kind of like when Raph, you and I, we started Creature. A lot of the first equipment purchases were like, "Oh, what equipment do we want?" And then, let's buy a sauna.
More than the first.
Well,
everything we bought.
The sauna was like one of the obvious and worst examples. But then when we created Locker Room, it was like, okay, this is the person. What is every problem that they have, and how can we build a gym around them? Not for a single moment was I like, oh, I want this, or this seems like a good idea.
It's almost like a red flag now. We're like, oh, if I really want it,
we're
it's
not
a bad
that person.
sign.
Yeah,
You
we
know?
might be in like 20 years, but we are not that person at all. So it is so important for people to harness that concept, which takes a while. Is to like, what do they want? What does my customer want? What do I want?
And ask them. You know, even if you've asked them once before, ask them again, because just like at the moment, fashion trend is oversized and people like oversized and they want that. It may not be the same a year down the line, you know. So
back
it's
to skin tight.
Yeah, back to skin tight, and you need to be constantly aware of that and making sure you're checking in with people to know what it is that they want or what they want to see next, because you're then not setting yourself up to be disappointed when your product doesn't sell. And I have to constantly remind myself of that as well when I want to just release pink things, pink items. Let's make it pink.
What was what ranked highest on what I would wear the most, but then perform the worst of clothing items?
Oh, I think, you know, any of the more out there designs that I've done, I think bright colors is something that I thought people would want, just purely on the basis that if you go into your wardrobe now and you look how many black t-shirts there are, you know,
Lots. And we got a lot.
Yeah. And then I release a black t-shirt, and I've got a lot of black t-shirts, you know, but you've continued to buy them already. But I was always of the thought process that, well, if people look in their wardrobes, they don't have an orange t-shirt. If I have an orange t-shirt, people are going to want this one.
It's logical. It's fucking logical.
Everyone wants to complete a rainbow in their closet. Which colors do they not have?
It doesn't always work like that.
So in the opposite sense, your best sellers were your blacks and your white releases.
No.
Okay.
No, I did a whole black drop called the Blackout as our third release. And we ordered more of that stuff than anything we'd ever done, more items than we'd ever done of black, because we thought, well, this is going to be popular because everyone has black. But it wasn't, and it was purely because it wasn't that the black items weren't going to sell well, but we gave people too many options. And that's something that I learned from that drop, was that if you give people options, then it makes it harder for them to make decisions, in which case the likelihood of them favoring one or the other is far greater. Or ultimately going onto a store, if there's too many options, the likelihood of you then stepping away to rethink about which one you're going to have is far greater, you know? Whereas if people are coming on, you've got one black t-shirt, they know they want that, there's no thought process for them, they take it. And I learned that from that drop particularly, to not release 5 black T-shirts with different designs on, because there's going to be favorites, there's going to be non-favorites. Pick one, you know? So that
also must be way more affordable, right? To just have one, have plenty of sizes, than to go in heaps of different SKUs and potentially not have as many sizes or invest too much in so many different SKUs.
The key is to create demand for the product. You know, we were in that position where when we're creating something, we build that much hype over that particular item that if people don't take it, they're going to miss out.
Yeah.
And that's more scary for someone than them having option, you know? So I think that's the key in any industry. It's hard to fucking do, but to continually create hype, you know? Yeezy continued to do it for so long with every Yeezy that come out. Some of the colors are so off, but people want to buy them, you know, just because they can say they get that. And that's really where the trick lies in clothing, is regardless of how many you order, create enough demand and it will sell out.
Yeah.
And being honest with you guys, what we've done in the past as well, especially in our early days, we'd put product on the site that was never going to drop. And we'd sell it out within the first couple of minutes straight away.
Just as a tester.
Dummy products. Because as soon as people are starting to see that and they see that something's selling out, panic starts to go, oh, it's the item that I'm going to sell out as well. So, you know, you've always got to be aware of that and be smart with that in e-commerce as well, or especially in fashion, is if you can dummy that demand. Because at the end of the day, if I put a sale on, you don't know whether I've got 5 of them in stock.
Yeah.
I've got 15,000 of them in stock to sell.
Yeah.
You know, so that's you gotta play to that, being on the right side of the fence to make smart decisions of where you can manipulate without upsetting people, but manipulate the market so that you're selling stuff out straight away.
The hardest thing I've always thought about apparel as well is sizing. It's like even recently, like, because we print on RecGen at the gym, and it's so hard to get in terms of the quantities and stuff and how it's made, and it takes a while because it's high quality. It's like, all right, well, our last 15 clients that needed gear, they were like all smalls and mediums. So let's like get more smalls and mediums. The next 10 to 15 people that walk in the gym need double XLs and XLs. Always. And it's like, oh, fuck. Now we've got too many of this size, too many of that size. But we've only got a really small sample size. So do you see, because you have such a massive sample size, do you find there's trends in sizes with like how your people buy? Is it more predictable with bigger numbers?
100%. But when we first started out, we went for a pretty even spread, kind of filled the middle to bigger sizes out, and we were left with lots of extra smalls. Now we have much more knowledge over how many of each size we generally sell, so we just hit those sort of trends as well. And like I said, like, my goal is to sell out of everything anyway, so I would rather do 5 t-shirts less and sell out extra small than think about, I've missed out on potentially 3 or 4 more sales because we didn't have that in stock, because it means the next time that extra small comes round, people are going to be so much more excited to try and grab that size.
Because they missed out.
Yes, and this is where you've got to constantly be thinking long game and not try and grow too quickly. Is one of the lessons that I've learned in this first year, is to not try and just think, okay, well, we did X amount on our first sale, so we're going to do even more and make even more money, because you can very quickly get caught when you got a very full warehouse of Black Friday.
Black Friday in July. So how do you make the, I guess, decision to invest more money and time in quality versus in marketing? Because everyone knows of like really good brands that market extremely well, and they get so excited and it sells out all the time, and then they get it for the first time and they're like, this is shit, or this is like so average compared to what I expected, based off how much I paid for it, based off how much it sells out, based off how many Instagram followers this brand has. And then it makes me think, well, they're doing so well with like a very average item. How much time or what consideration do you put into that with your company, in terms of, you could spend all your money and all your time perfecting quality down to the last, cotton fiber and the last stitch. When is it good enough? And like, how do you continue to progress quality? I imagine it's very difficult.
Yes, and it's very much driven again by the audience, what I would spend on a t-shirt versus what 95% of the people out there would spend on a t-shirt are leagues apart.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm prepared to spend $1,000 on a t-shirt that's extremely high quality because I love it and I love that brand, then I know that I could potentially afford to spend $200 a unit in terms of creating something that's incredibly high quality. All right. But if you've got someone, and my audience especially, we've talked about weightlifting, we've talked it's not really a sport that's renowned with money. I've got to take that consideration into place, and that I've got to produce something that is of good enough quality that I would wear it, but also lines up to the point in which my audience have got amount to spend. You know, we get some people that will come in every single month and they'll spend £600-700 on Big Friday supplies. That's a huge amount of disposable income to be able to invest that each month in their luxury item. Majority of people will have to budget to be able to spend maybe £100 from their salary on luxury goods. So I need to then be wary of that when I'm trying to create a product. Do these marry up? Does my product serve the purpose that someone's going to expect of the quality for the amount that they're spending? And that's really what it comes down to in terms of what we're going to develop on a product.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can't be helped, you know, and that's we find that with our weightlifting belts. My weightlifting belt is probably 5 times more expensive than any other weightlifting belt in the market. But for me, I cannot sacrifice quality on that product.
When you got like tons of weight on your back.
Yeah.
It's very much for me something that's so important in my performance is having a high quality belt. I'm not prepared to sacrifice quality to produce a piece of equipment that's so important in performance, which is why people will come on the store and go, how are you charging $300 for a weightlifting belt? Because I know it's the best, highest quality handmade belt that you can buy, and that's what I'm going to use. You know, so it takes people some time to be able to change their thought process with it. But, you know, for something that's performance-based, I'm prepared to spend more on because I don't want to sacrifice that when it comes to my performance.
Yeah. And how have you managed still on this supply chain thing, obviously global supply chain issues last few years? You've not had the opportunity because you started, when did you start Big Friday Supplies? Was it during the pandemic?
So with 14 months in now.
Yeah, so you haven't had the luxury that other people have had starting their clothing companies of going to the factories to hold the fabrics and to pull on them and to see what the actual color looks like, you know, on a computer screen versus in real life, and to meet the factory owners and stuff, something that my dad did for many years with his products. And there's like famous stories of my grandpa going there in China in the 70s when they were like producing inline skates and skateboards, and he'd put the inline skates on and there'd just be this white guy with sunnies and his hand behind his back just cruising around the factory floor with the skates on, because they produced them but they didn't know how to use them. They probably didn't even know what they were for, and he puts them on, he starts skating with them, and he'll come back and be like, this is too tight, this doesn't work here, let's change this here, twist that, do this, blah blah blah, to make a better product. You haven't had that luxury. So how have you, I mean, I'm sure you're going to start traveling there at some point, but how difficult has it been, like, getting around this hurdle?
Extremely difficult. Like, I can't even describe how difficult it is. More so from a time perspective, what would normally take probably someone a split-second decision to pick up a fabric and go, yeah, shit, and then go for a new one. I've got to, first of all, try and create a relationship with someone in China. And relationships are so important in business to be able to get a good level of service. You know, it's the whole reason why big businesses take their clients out and wine them and dine them, you know, to build that relationship so that they get a good quality level of service and repeat custom. It's hard to do that with someone when you're speaking via communication online. And that's been extremely challenging. And then, yes, the process in which, you know, we'll ask for a sample of something, and then the sample comes, and then, okay, say I like that sample, I've got to then go, right, we need to check their print quality. So then they then need to send me another one, which postage in the moment in the world is fucked. Yeah. So that's another 2 weeks lost. Then they print me the finished product, and then we go, okay, cool, now we need to talk about packaging. And this timeline between creating something is just astronomical. And, you know, Jack, who's kind of in charge of that in my business, he pulls his hair out all the time, because it's like, I'll go, so where are we at with the golf range? We started the golf range 6 months ago. We'll be lucky if we can actually launch a product within a year.
Wow.
You know, because it's that kind of back. It's
Jesus.
not like it's being left unattended.
Yeah.
It's getting it worked on every single day, and people don't appreciate that, you know. Whereas for bigger companies who already have those relationships set up, who already have, and luck comes into this a little bit as well. You can hit jackpot with finding a good factory and be really lucky that you get high quality product. But from my experience, the amount of shit factories that I've had to try and communicate with, the amount of money, thousands of pounds that I've wasted in shit samples, I'm like, when am I going to... When's my luck coming? But, you know, that's part of the process, and that's part of the reason why people get into this game and get out of it very quickly, because these frustrations stop people from continuing to carry on.
Yeah.
And again, we're lucky in that position where there's enough people in this and driving it forward to be able to keep each other positive when things like this don't go wrong. And majority of my hair falling out is probably thanks to Big Friday supplies over the last year.
That's a good story to tell yourself. So I've always wanted to ask you this question. When it first came to me, I was like, nah, I'm going to save it for the next podcast. But people that follow you know, and that know you obviously know that you, only thing you love more than, you know, clothing is shoes. Have you ever considered creating your own shoe? And if so, give me like your initial vision for what the shoe would be like. Or would it be more of a collab with Nike?
You know, it's funny you say that, like the collab with Nike, because I do believe in certain aspects of developing a product, and knee supports is one of them, lifting shoes is one of them. It would be very hard for me to go out there with nothing like the budget that Nike have and produce something that's better than Nike. Okay,
course, yeah.
And you've got to be real with yourself in that respect. You know, Nike will invest hundreds of thousands with a huge team of people into the development of
The shoelace.
a shoelace, but the lifting shoe in general. You know, so for me to go up against that would be extremely difficult. I'd be much more inclined to try and collab with someone and use their expertise and put my spin on something. But it still blows my mind when new shoes get released, and I do a few reviews of them on YouTube, and I pick them up, and it comes back to what we were saying earlier. I'm like, did they ask a fucking weightlifter if this was good or not? Because I'm like, I would have never done that. I would have changed this. I would have done that. But it's like they never, even with their budget, with the knowledge that they have, went and asked good weightlifters what they thought. You know, and that blows my mind that process is still very much a blur for an extremely big company. And it's why, for example, you would think with the Metcon, you think the latest Metcon would be the best Metcon because it's had all these levels of development and had the opportunity to be worn by so many people, but yet people still go back and wear the Metcon 4. It's why people are still wearing the Nike Remelio 2 as the favoured weightlifting shoe instead of the...
What are they up to?
Well, they're on the 4, and then the Cervelio is kind of like the 4.5. Because I think that process has fallen down from the continual development of something. And the only thing that's going to impact that shoe, or should be impacting that shoe if someone's happy with it, is science. You know, if you can come up with something that's technology is better, that's going to help it perform better, then great. But I think people get into the kind of rut of we need something new, so we've got to change something. Whereas if you've got something that's great, there's nothing wrong with continuing to push something that's great and that people want. But I think it's that fear that, you know, for Nike, if they were to never produce another weightlifting shoe other than the Nike Remelio 2, they made that shoe so fucking good that no one's going to need to replace that shoe for 5 years. So that definitely plays a part in it.
Yeah.
I think, you know, in terms of my own development of a lifting shoe or even a sneaker or anything in that space, it's got to be something different if I'm going to be able to impact that market, because I'm under no illusion that it would be extremely difficult to produce something that would be different or better than Nike. Would the investment in time, in money, in development be worth it to sell to a few thousand weightlifters? Probably not.
I wonder if it's like the weightlifting shoe community as well is cooking something up with some other brand out there that might surpass a Nike or an Adidas at some point. Because it's very possible. It's not, like you said, they haven't it's not like running shoes. Hard to compete in running shoes, right?
Yeah, but the amount of people that are now, look at what Noble have done as a brand and come into that space and now pioneering a lot of development in the CrossFit space and even in other industries now, but they've got a huge budget to be able to do it. I think one of the things that will always remain a hurdle in Olympic weightlifting is the people's mindset. It's very old school. People don't like change. They don't like the modern stuff in Olympic weightlifting. That's why people still wear the same old dusty weightlifting shoes, those classic looking as you can think of, because they like that old school ruggedness of Olympic weightlifting. And mindset, I don't know if it ever will change. That is my goal in this space, is to help people's mindset change in terms of how they present themselves as weightlifters. But it's an extremely big hurdle.
Yeah, no one does that in running. They're like, oh, these are like the shoes from the 1970s.
Yeah, not really.
I just want the carbon fiber plate.
You just want the good looking shoe. Yeah. It's the same in golf. You want the flexiest looking golf clubs because at least then you're like, and that's always been my ethos. If I lose, I'm the best dressed. I'll win best dressed. And I used to say that when I go and compete internationally. Well, I came 23rd, but I won best dressed. And that was my
war hat backwards. Yeah, it's like we had the discussion, like weightlifting, the lockout. I think even I was having it with you. Why does the lockout matter that much, really, at the end of the day? If they can lift it overhead and they can then eventually lock their elbows out and stand and hold it there.
Bro, it's more impressive.
It's like, it's crazy.
It's harder.
It's like a little lock, unlock, and you miss like a world record. It seems so silly at this point, especially because so many other sports change every year.
And develop and
get better.
And get better. Yeah. It's the same with without going back too much into weightlifting, but it's the way that weightlifting's viewed as a sport. It's extremely boring to watch, and I would have, if I was in charge of the IWF, I would have looked at the way that CrossFit first did that weightlifting event in the stadium where everyone was lifting together and it was like a rolling bar and it was exciting, and thought, hang on a minute, we could probably change the way that weightlifting is viewed. And that's something that for me is definitely a goal of next year, is to run my first weightlifting event that's going to really change the way that the sport is viewed. And that's something that needs to happen. And I always look back at these things and it sounds crazy, but I'm like, why can't it be me? Why shouldn't I be the one to go and do that?
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Sick.
I'll definitely go to that.
Yeah, we'll have beers, we'll have dancing girls,
commentators,
dancing boys, whatever it is.
No, it'll be fun. Yeah, so I want to get your thoughts on, as we come to the end here, but get your thoughts overall, because you're involved in so many seminars at different gyms across the world, especially the CrossFit scene. Now, obviously, Raf and I recently made the decision to kind of sell off that part of our journey and begin the new chapter with Locker Room. What do you see as the future for CrossFit style gyms? You're still very much in that world, but in some ways, you're almost like a privileged visitor that comes along. It's like, oh, he's here, he gets off the plane, everyone waves to him, he does a seminar, and then he leaves. So you're involved, but you're not,
you're not one of us.
Yeah.
You're not really, in the CrossFit world necessarily, one of the CrossFitters. So where do you see the future of that space yourself, in terms of gyms, in terms of the brand CrossFit, group fitness, kind of as a whole? I'm curious as to like where you see it going, because in some ways it kind of, your business relies on its success as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think it will always heavily impact my business, my audience, and what I do. I think that CrossFit will always have its place in terms of, because I think the foundations of what it does in terms of bringing community, bringing people together will always remain. People's, I guess, what they get out of training online or training full stop will change. I think over the next few years, we're going to see a huge change in terms of the use of virtual PT screens, home training, etc. That's going to change, I guess, the way that people interact when they're training. I think that that's going to have a huge impact on the sport. I think that in terms of the fashion trend of what people like to do in the way that they train, I think things will always naturally progress as people's importance on their health and their fitness continues to grow, which I can think that's something that's going to continually keep going up, is what people value is their health and their fitness. As that continues to increase, the amount of money and what people are prepared to invest in their health and fitness is going to increase. So what you're going to see is the types of services continue to get more and more bespoke, more and more high level, because people are looking for that next thing, that more premium service to make them healthier, make them fitter. It's the same reason why, now versus 5 years ago, how much you invest in health food supplements in that industry alone is continuing to boom, because people are taking more care of themselves and want to worry about their health and fitness. The same will happen in this fitness space. So although I don't think CrossFit will ever change, I think that they'll always have its space in that lower tier. There'll definitely be more bespoke, higher, smaller group sessions of that sport continuing to start to grow and poke its head about. And it's very similar to like what you guys are doing in Locker Room. You're very much at the top of that mountain, offering the most highest level service, because and there'll be more people just like you that are going to open more of those gyms, because people are now leaning towards that in terms of wanting to invest more money. If you don't give someone the option to spend more money, they won't. And I think people are starting to come round to that, and I think that that's where it's going. In my opinion, it's going up in terms of what people invest.
Yeah, I think as well, like the timing of it has been critical as well. In our market, in the Sydney market, Australian market, we could never have done what we have done as successfully as even if we had the same skill set, but just reverse the timeline 5 years, the market wasn't ready for it.
No.
So like markets get smarter, they develop, their interests and their needs change. F45 when it first started was like premium group fitness. It was like the best fit out. It was so nice, clean TV screens. Now F45 in the Australian market is considered the low end of group fitness.
Yeah,
people,
the lower tier,
People go and say, oh, we're like the premium fit out. They're like, nicer showers, nicer equipment. In contrast to F45, they're not calling it out specifically, but that's what they're saying.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. It really comes back down to the fact that people are now wanting to and are prepared to invest more in their health. And that will continually to project everyone and everything in that industry up. Same reason why I could turn around and charge $10,000 for the training course. If I'd done that 10 years ago, people would be like, what are you on? That's like half a mortgage. But people go, yeah, okay, and hand over their details now, because they're prepared to invest in themselves. And I think that's a great thing on the whole, for the industry, for fitness, full stop.
Nice.
That's for sure.
Nice. Sonny, you've got a lot of like balls that you're juggling at the moment. What can we expect from you in the next 12 to 18 months? Like what's coming out? Because I know you've got a few projects that are being built at the moment. Yeah. What are you hoping launches over the next 12 to 18 months that people can get excited about?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me in the next 12 months is going to be the Mobility Manual app. That's been 2 years in the development. I mean, 3 years ago, I first filmed that program on my iPhone, which still makes me laugh. Filmed it on my iPhone with no speaker, and filmed the whole course. And we've sold hundreds of thousands of copies of the Mobility Manual now. We know that that's something that people want. So I've always wanted to create something that's even more user-friendly for people, which is why we've developed the Mobility Manual app. But not only that, I think, what I do with mobility is it's sport specific. And although there's other great mobility apps out there that provide people with stretching routines and mobility routines, where I specialize is what we do in terms from a mobility standpoint is sport specific. So we're going to see that when the app launches in January, be able to diversify into other sports, bring other sport-specific mobility to help with performance and, again, reduce risk of injury and all of these things that push towards health. That's going to be the main focus of definitely Q1, Q2 of next year, and diversifying into those other sports with the same sort of ethos. The lifting zone is going on hold. That's one of the things that's been really hard this week for me, because the lifting zone was meant to be my legacy in terms of how weightlifting is learnt and taught. It's going on hold because simply the product isn't as good as I want it to be. So we're pushing that now to later part next year.
When was it supposed to be released?
Yesterday.
It's definitely on hold.
Yeah. So and that's the thing with business. If it misses its deadline, other things are coming up,
Yeah.
you know, and we can't spread the team too thin to be focusing on that. Well, we've got all of our focus on the mobility because nothing will really hit like it's meant to. So that's the big focus. You'll see Big Friday Supplies release more of a core range in terms of essential items of high quality for Olympic weightlifting. I've had my fun playing. Now I'm going to really focus in on my audience and what my audience are asking for. And then just like we mentioned earlier, still continue to produce stuff that I guess shows my creative flair, but it won't become the sole focus of Big Friday Supplies. It will really go back to its roots, and we'll try and expand through our roots this time around.
And then from a content perspective, I mean, without giving too much away, like what are you trying to invest more in, maybe take a little bit away from, because obviously there's so much choice, YouTube, TikTok, emails, websites, all this sort of stuff. Is there like a new strategy, or is it just more of what we're already doing but better?
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because it kind of goes back to what we were saying about where my strengths lie, where my weaknesses lie. I've come away from writing so much of my content now. I'm a terrible speller, terrible at grammar.
Yes.
You'll agree for that.
Terrible.
And
what has he just texted me? Sense.
So we've actually hired a full-time copywriter now it's taken over more from the email standpoint, email marketing side of things. YouTube is definitely, I think, will be a big push this year. Long form content that people want to watch and invest in for more time. You'll see a definite focus on that. We hired a videographer towards the end of last year, but COVID's kind of locked him in New Zealand now for a short period of time. But throughout next year, we'll kind of be blogging more of my life, my lifestyle, and kind of giving people the education in long form.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, lots of stuff going on, many balls to juggle, and it will require probably a third podcast at the end of the year when all that stuff goes down well. Thanks for being back on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for your time.
Sonny.
Cheers,
Awesome.
boys.